Hello, EA.
Hi, Matt.
I'm so happy that you're here today to do this interview.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Both EA and I are struggling right now to finish our MPhil dissertations. And I'm just so sick of writing about my own that I'm going to make EA talk about hers just to get some new interesting topics in my life. So thank you for being my guinea pig in this instance. Can you tell us what your program at Cambridge is to start off?
So I am doing the MPhil in sociology. The MPhil in sociology has 4 tracks, and I'm on the political and economic sociology track.
Very cool.
Yes.
And your thesis, your dissertation in one sentence would be described as what?
The study of the job quality of self-employed youth in Ibadan, Nigeria.
Amazing. You sound like you had that, well, I guess it's the title of your dissertation.
It's the title of my dissertation,
yeah.
so I need to know what my title is.
You know, honestly, I'm not sure if I could do the same for myself. That's something I should probably memorize. Anyway, okay, so let's get a little bit of background information just on you and like academic history and everything like that to build up to this MPhil topic, which sounds very exciting. So where are you from, and where did you spend your childhood?
Okay, so I grew up in Nigeria mostly. So I'm from there. I'm from Nigeria.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And are you from the area that you're currently studying?
Yes, I am. I'm actually studying my home city. So, I mean, that's where the focus of my study is. So I'm pretty familiar with where I'm studying. I tend to be inspired by my surroundings. And I think I'm one of those people that is inspired by familiarity. So most of my studies my undergraduate dissertation and also my MPhil dissertation have been based in Nigeria. And my MPhil dissertation specifically is based in the city where I grew up, Ibadan.
Very cool.
Yes.
So tell us about your undergrad experience. What was your major? Where were you for this? And what was the thesis topic?
So I studied at Harvard University in Boston, and I did social anthropology and African American studies with also a citation in French. So I was really all over the place.
Wow, okay, that's a lot.
Which is the beauty of the liberal arts system,
Yeah.
which is why I'm so grateful I was able to go to university in the States, because it really, the flexibility allows you to explore a lot of things. So actually when in Nigeria, I thought I was going to be a doctor, because everybody that's a little bit smart goes and becomes a doctor. And then when I went to the States, just having the opportunity to take all these different interesting courses, and then I ended up in social anthropology and African studies, and yes.
So you started your undergrad thinking you were going to do pre-med?
I started my undergrad thinking I was going to study chemistry and do pre-med. And I did take a few science courses, and they were good. I enjoyed them. But I fell in love with anthropology, social anthropology. So, yeah.
That is so cool.
Yes.
And well, you did anthropology amongst 20 other things too. So
Yes.
you really took advantage of the liberal arts.
Yes, I think I'm the kind of
structure.
person that likes moving from thin to thin. So it definitely fed me in that regard of allowing me to try so many different things.
That's
which is
wonderful.
Something I'm grateful for, yes.
So if you had gone to university in Nigeria, would you not have had that kind of flexibility that the
Not
liberal
at
arts
all.
system
Yeah. So when I
offers?
actually did the entrance examinations to university in Nigeria, I put that I wanted to study medicine and surgery, and I would have been bound to that.
Wow.
So if I'd ended up going to school in Nigeria, I would probably be a doctor by now. So
Wow.
yes.
Different life. A very different life.
Yes, it's pretty much more similar to the UK system. Very much.
I see.
When you enter into university, you have to have a clear idea of what it is that you want to study, and you stick to that. Which has its benefits too. I mean, you also don't want to end up doing too many things and you don't have a degree at the end of your studies. So
Yeah.
I think everything has its pros and cons. Yes.
I think that's true for sure.
Yeah.
From an American perspective, it feels crazy to have to know by the age of 17, 18 what you want to do for maybe the rest of your life.
Yes.
But at the same time, if you get it started, you don't end up like me, totally confused and having no idea what you want to do with your life. So, anyway, so tell us a little bit more about your undergraduate thesis. So you said it was based on Nigeria still, yes?
Yes, so definitely My interests have basically been in the area of development, economic development. So in my undergraduate dissertation, I explored that more from the area of governance and the role that the government has to play with economic development. So very much, I mean, for my undergraduate degree in anthropology, I was able to take courses in so many different things. I took course on the two Koreas, the history of Korea. I was able to take a sociolinguistics course, which is actually my favorite anthropology course.
No way.
And but my focus was definitely in the areas of governance and bureaucracy, and so I took quite a number of courses on the anthropology of governance and the anthropology of bureaucracy. And so my undergraduate thesis basically built off of that because I was interested in using ethnography, so like study of the everyday, study of day-to-day processes to illuminate what governance actually looks like in Nigeria. And so my undergraduate dissertation focused on a specific policy called Servicom, which means Service Compact with all Nigerians. And it was basically a policy that was started in 2004 to improve the quality of service delivery in government agencies. So it was a policy that was put together through an international partnership between the United Kingdom Department for International Development and the Nigerian federal government. And so basically my thesis was looking at the kind of transnational dynamics that had led to the emergence of this policy and how the policy has been implemented in the everyday and on a ground level. And so basically this involved me conducting interviews with DFID officials, with senior level bureaucrats in Nigeria, with Servicom officers who work on the policy at the national level, and also looking at how the policy played out in a hospital setting. So looking at this through different layers of governance to see how a policy that looked so crisp and clear on the international level where it was being put together, by the time you got to this hospital, you have bureaucrats trying to make meaning of what does this exactly mean? What does it mean to implement something that is supposed to improve service delivery? And then them giving all these different meanings to this policy. And another interesting thing about the policy was that it was characterized by excessive rhetoric. And so you have all these posters all over the country in different government agencies announcing this policy that is supposed to improve service delivery. And beyond that, it's almost like a shadow in what is in terms of what is actually happening in bureaucratic offices. So that was my undergraduate thesis.
That's a lot, but super interesting.
Yeah.
So I presume that you did field work for that.
Yes.
Okay, so you went back, and where in Nigeria were you doing that field work?
So I did field work both in the National Servicom office, and I did field work in a federal government hospital and federal government university, their Servicom offices. So
very interesting.
Yeah.
So did you know the kind of things that you were going to discover in advance? Did you have like hypotheses that were then confirmed, or were you kind of blindsided by all of these like hidden elements of?
So anthropology is very much ethnography focuses a lot on exploration, so it's not very theoretically driven. And so it was more like I was going into the field to find out what's happening there, and based on that build up a theoretical understanding of the kind of processes that are going on in terms of this governance.
And so now you're doing an MPhil in sociology.
Yes.
So before we get into the details about it, social anthropology versus sociology, more or less the same field, or slight differences, or very different?
Yeah, so I mean, basically all the social sciences are the same, to be frank.
Makes sense, yeah.
But I think the reason why I shifted from social anthropology to sociology is while I really like ethnography and I like the approach of social anthropology, I felt sociology would equip me with more tools in order to study society and be able to produce findings that could actually make people's lives better, in the sense that while social anthropology is very much qualitative ethnography, sociology would allow me to mobilize both quantitative and qualitative tools. So that's another reason why I was interested in moving more towards sociology, so that I'll have a broader base of analytical tools to work with. So,
very interesting.
Yeah.
So your quantitative origins, medicine and that kind of stuff have ended up creeping back into your life in this very convoluted, broad spectrum of interesting things.
Yes.
That's very cool. So, does that mean that the methodology of your current research is less based on interviews? What research methods do you actually use?
It's because my current MPhil dissertation, we're having to do it in 9 months. You know the kind of struggle this is.
I know it.
I just decided to, even though I did take statistics courses this year, in order to develop my quantitative abilities, but for my thesis, I just decided to stick with interviews and qualitative research because since I was thinking initially that I would do a mixed methods project, but I realized, which was really good on hindsight, that it would be a lot. And so I should just focus on doing something qualitative. And so, so that's why I decided for my MPhil dissertation, my focus has solely been on interviews.
I see. Yes. But you would not call it an ethnography?
No, because ethnography takes a longer time. You are immersed in the day-to-day experiences of entrepreneurs, and I wouldn't say my MPhil dissertation has been that in-depth and focused as ethnography would be. Usually in ethnography, a key important part of ethnography is participant observation. So you spend a lot of time with the people you're studying and the communities you're studying, which is very different from just interviewing. And in fact, participant observation is actually really key in qualitative research, and I think it should generally be incorporated. And I wish I could have incorporated more into my study, but because of time constraints, I just had to stick more with interviewing.
Makes sense. And you did manage to do 2 different rounds of field work on site, yeah?
Yes, well, it was basically, it's still the same project, yes.
But still, just to clarify for our listeners and viewers, that is very ambitious and impressive for an MPhil student. I mean, at the beginning of my program, went up to the director and asked whether it was possible to do maybe 3 weeks of field work, because I have a background in linguistic field work. And she was like, that is extremely uncommon. You will not be able to do it. It is too much on your plate, going to a different place and having to gather all of your information and then coming back and write it all up is too much for you. But clearly it wasn't too much for you, which is super impressive.
Well, I still need to finish the dissertation, so.
We're not necessarily done yet. So we've been circling around this dissertation quite a bit, but now tell us the full story of how you came across this topic and how you've actually executed your research.
Okay, so on a maybe more national scale, a broader level, this topic emerges from one of the main socioeconomic problems that Nigeria is facing today, which is unemployment. Unemployment is currently very high. 1 in 2 youth are unemployed. Well, officially, even though a lot of these officially unemployed youth are actually into self-employment, considering that there's no social safety net, so they have to find a way to survive.
What is the definition of a youth?
In Nigeria, that's between the ages of 18 and 35.
Cool.
And also, the general unemployment rate as at, I think, 2017 was 18%. So this is definitely a serious issue in the country. And as part of a way to tackle this issue, youth self-employment, youth entrepreneurship has become one of the mainstays of the government policy. So government has developed a lot of initiatives to encourage youth to develop skills and tools that they will need to go into self-employment. So you have different programs, both by the government and private individuals. And I actually participated in one of these programs during my national service year.
Wow.
So
because you wanted to be self-employed, or because you just wanted to know the ins and outs?
No, because it was actually compulsory. Yes, since considering that this is a huge issue. So when you finish university, all Nigerian graduates are expected to do the national service. The full name is the National Youth Service Corps.
Okay.
And so basically it's 1 year after you finish university where you're supposed to serve the country. And it's kind of a bridge between your graduation and beginning work. And so they found out in the NYSC program that a lot of young people on completing their national service go into the job market and are unable to find jobs. And so they need a way to survive. And so they introduced this scheme called the Skills Acquisition and Entrepreneurial Development Program. And so basically you're supposed to learn a skill or something that you can transform into some kind of business that you can use to sustain yourself in case that you're not able to get a corporate job or a government job on completing your national service. So during the year, I learned hairdressing, so how to do hair, and I learned about makeup. So yeah.
Wow.
So I just got fascinated after hanging out with all these self-employed youth and seeing the different interesting kinds of things that they were doing. And so I was interested in exploring this further in order to understand about their working experiences. I guess coming from an ethnographic anthropological perspective, find out about their working experiences, what's it like to be self-employed, and what are the prospects of self-employed youth, and how can the government better design policies and programs that will support these young people that are doing really interesting, very creative things, but are often have to face very stressful working conditions and are often left on their own. So this is where my interest in this project came from.
Right. Okay, so you lived the experience and then you wanted to go.
Well, I never really started my own business, but I was learning these different skills, and I spent a lot of time with people who actually run these self-employed youth and run these businesses. Wow. Yes.
So what are other examples of self-employment that your friends or other people you knew were taking on?
Different things. I mean, there are people who are into catering, food, who do baking, who do drinks, people into fashion designing, make clothes, bags, people who do bead making, people who make snacks, people who make soap. So there's a wide variety of things that youth are engaging in terms of self-employment. For the focuses of my project, I focused on 2 more traditional trades, so catering and fashion designing, and then 2 more digital trades, so looking at those who are in the graphic design and printing business, and also those who do digital marketing and web development. So those were the industries I was focusing on in my interviews with self-employed youth.
I see.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So did you get to interview any of the people who you knew who were doing it when you were doing it?
Yes, I interviewed I interviewed classmates, friends, but I also interviewed other people that I was connected with. I used purposive sampling, so the snowball method, and so getting people to connect me with other people in order to talk to them about their working experiences.
Interesting. I've never heard a term for that process, but I've actually used that process before. So now I'm going to include that in my dissertation, I think. Quite honestly, I will. That's super interesting. So can you tell me a little bit more about the program? Like what kind of skills you were taught and in what context you were taught these skills? Because I would imagine that it's pretty difficult that you have all of these people with extremely different interests who all want to start something. But isn't the channel to start each of these individual fields different? And
sorry, what do you mean?
As in, if you were within this program, I'm sorry, what was the name?
The SAID, Skills Acquisition and Entrepreneurial Development Program.
How did classes? What did classes look like if the fields that people were interested in were so different? I mean, catering and fashion, I would imagine.
You would learn with somebody who actually does this work.
So you would be assigned
so they usually at the beginning of your national service there's a fair, and so different people in different trades come: shoemaking, bead making, fashion designing, makeup, hairdressing, and so then you choose what you're interested in, and so you actually learn with somebody who practices this. So I learned with the hairdresser, and I also learned with the makeup artist.
I see. And where is there a business element to it in terms of learning the skills to start your own work and the entrepreneurship elements?
So they actually don't really focus on the business for the program, which is probably maybe an error. they don't really focus on developing the actual business skills. It's more they teach you how to develop the skill, the technical skill. So
Makes
if you
sense.
don't have business acumen, that could actually end up being a problem in terms of how do you actually convert this technical skill you have into a thriving enterprise.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, I had no idea that this was a thing. This is very interesting. So, what have been your findings so far? Like, what are some interesting things that you're including in your dissertation that you want other people to know?
So yeah, I mean, it's still a work in progress, but basically, in looking at this issue of self-employment, I was using a model that actually was developed in Europe by somebody called Francis Green, in order to study job quality, and basically it has about 7 components. So looking at earnings, looking at prospects, that's your level of job security and possibility of advancement on the job, looking at your physical environment of your workplace, the social environment, looking at your skills, the level of your skills and your possibilities for training, looking at the intensity of your work. So during the time that you're at work, the level of physical and mental pressure that you face, looking at issues of working time quality, how many hours do you work, are you able to maintain a work-life balance? And then in addition to those aspects that Francis Green proposed, I'm also interested in looking at meaningfulness of work. So what kind of purpose does your work give you in terms of the self-employed youth? And also for my thesis, another component of my thesis is looking at how this varies based on socio-demographic characteristics. And so I was interested in looking at the experiences of those who have completed tertiary education versus those who have not completed tertiary education, looking at it through the lens of gender and age, and how all these factors play into what kind of working experiences the self-employed youth. And so some of the things that so far found interesting in my interviews are in terms of earnings, there's something that really came out from all the self-employed youth was sometimes they earn nothing, they have no profit, and sometimes they earn a lot. And I mean, we have to think about this in terms of if it's such a fluctuating stream of income and they have no social safety net, what does this do to their how does this affect them? I mean, their well-being in terms of having such varied earnings as self-employed youth. Another thing, well, in terms of their level of security on the job, something that was interesting was they all felt pretty secure in their jobs. So they didn't think that they would lose their businesses, that they would easily lose their businesses, which is very interesting considering that most people think of business entrepreneurship as very risky. But I mean, in this sense that they're actually working with their hands, and so they're doing things like catering and fashion designing. And so they think that, I mean, even if their market share reduces, there will still be people that they will be able to serve. And so there was a high degree of security in terms of their level of security on the job. Other interesting things was about a lot of them expressed that they were not willing to take loans, except a few of those who have completed tertiary education that seemed a bit more exposed to different avenues for raising financing to be able to expand their businesses, either through like competitions, entrepreneurship competitions, or through even taking loans from like microfinance banks. So that was something that those who had tertiary education definitely had an edge on in terms of being able to know how to harness multiple avenues in order to raise finance. Another interesting thing I found was that for those who did not have tertiary education, their unions were very important in terms of the social environment of where they worked. And so they couldn't operate within their communities if they were not members of these unions, and these unions would collect money and dues from them. But then on the other hand, these unions were the ones that provided them opportunities for training, and so this was very much a huge part of their social experience from the work, which was very different from those who have completed tertiary education that were working more in isolation and didn't really have that much to do with these unions. And then also the issue of, in terms of like the social environment, the risk of, verbal abuse was huge from customers, but then also for those who work in slums and other low-income areas, the issue of physical abuse from customers was another thing that emerged. And issues of their health, some of them have accidents. First of all, there's a lot of illness they have related to stress, but also having accidents and things on the job, and then not having any health insurance or any way to be able to raise money to be able to pay for their expenses. So I'm still sifting through the data, but a lot of things have been emerging to paint a portrait of what the experiences are like for these self-employed youth within this context.
Definitely. Sounds like you have more than enough interesting findings to go on. Wow. Did you find anything interesting, I assume, if you were looking at social demographics, about gender dynamics with self-employment of youths?
I mean, I think the huge issue, I'm still sifting through my data, but I think so far, perhaps somewhere where gender comes to play a role is in the issue of working time quality. And so, I mean, for now, most of the self-employed youth actually work really long hours, I mean, because it's their business. And I mean, while most of them did say that they have no problem with the long hours of work, I noticed that for a lot of the self-employed women, the fact that they were eventually going to start families was an issue for them in terms of whether they will be able to sustain this momentum with their businesses. And so it was something that they came, well, it's okay in terms of their hours of work. Well, it's okay for now, but I mean, when I start a family, then yeah, I don't know how I would be able to balance this out. So yeah, but I'm definitely still sifting through my data to see the other ways where gender plays a role in affecting, and then also the issue of sexual harassment. I mean, that was definitely, as expected, that was definitely more an issue for self-employed women than for men. Yeah, so yeah.
I also wanted to ask, are there ways to get health insurance as a self-employed person, or is that not an option?
So, I mean, the Nigerian government has just instituted a national health insurance scheme, but in terms of implementation, so it's something I'm trying to read more about in terms of couching my findings and how how self-employed youth would be able to access health insurance. But for now, I don't know that much about how accessible this national health insurance scheme is. So it's something I'm still trying to find out more about. Yes.
I see. So with all of this very fascinating research that you're doing, how would you like to see it implemented beyond just the sphere of your turning in this paper? Like, not necessarily shifting the whole structure of government or anything like that necessarily, unless you want to, maybe. But
I wish I could.
That's amazing. But with this work, what do you want to get out of it, either for yourself or for other people?
I mean, definitely, as a social scientist, I'm somebody that is highly motivated by solving practical problems. I think that knowing about people's experiences, knowing about their attitudes, knowing about what they're experiencing can be definitely useful in shaping how they can be helped. And so, I mean, going into this project has always been for me very practical. How can people be helped? How can their lives be made better? And so, I mean, definitely, I'm still trying to put my findings together, and I do need to pass my dissertation first of all.
I can tell.
Moving beyond that, I would hope to get this published, but not only published, to also have this communicated in like a public way. I'm still looking for how that could be done. And I'm hoping that it could be used to shape policy. I mean, that sounds so big and highfalutin, but I mean, I'm also just an MPhil student, so I'm not putting pressure on myself now, but I definitely see this as a long-term project and something that I hope that as I gain more expertise, I can also be more involved in shaping development strategies in Nigeria and more broadly West Africa. So
wonderful.
Yes.
That's very exciting. You said you were just an MPhil student, but actually, you're also going to be a PhD student. Is that correct?
Yes.
Very exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
In sociology as well?
In sociology as well. I'm continuing along on this same topic.
Wonderful.
I'm interested in self-employment.
Yes. Are you still going to focus on Nigeria?
Yes,
okay,
still.
Cool. So how are you expanding? Well, this is maybe too hard of a question because I know you're not started the PhD yet, but do you have a general idea of how you want to expand the research you've currently done?
Yes, I mean, so now I'm actually, and I think this has actually emerged from my interviews I'm doing this MPhil project. Something that I've gotten really interested in is trying to understand the kind of social capital afforded by traditional apprenticeship systems. Mm-hmm. So there's the apprenticeship system as practiced by the different ethnic groups like the Yoruba, the Igbos, the Hausa. So looking at the kind of social capital provided by these different apprenticeship systems and the type of social capital provided by more Western-inspired startup incubators and co-working spaces. And so comparing the social capital of those different kinds of ways that businesses are birthed, businesses are incubated, and looking at how that impacts the job quality of self-employed people and also how that impacts their ability to innovate. Because I very much believe that self-employment is going to be very key in solving the unemployment crisis that Nigeria faces and a lot of African countries. And first of all, by providing these self-employed people with jobs, but also empowering them to create jobs for other people. Because I feel development very much comes from the ground up. It can't come from anywhere else. It has to come from the midst of the people. And so I definitely see self-employment as perhaps not the only thing, but really key in this. And so it's important that we understand, first of all, what has been practiced before, because it's not as if this is just a new thing. It's not a new phenomenon. It's been here for centuries. And so what are the useful things that we can learn about how this can be practiced in order to make this a sustainable form of, to make self-employment sustainable and actually contribute to economic development. So,
wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. It sounds like you have a clear idea of what you want to do.
Yeah, it's probably going to change a lot, but...
We'll see. Well, I like the idea. I like the idea very much. I wanted to ask you, I should have asked you a while ago, but I'm just really curious. Is there this quality of the job quality measurement?
Yes.
Is that a quantitative measurement, or is it just these are the criteria and you're going to look at all of these components?
Because I'm taking a qualitative approach, but I mean, actually, most of the research that has been done in job quality has actually been quantitative.
Really?
And so done with surveys and things like that. So, but it can go either way. It's a theoretical framework, and then you can either build off on it based off on quantitative methods through surveys and then quantitative analysis, or go the more qualitative route and use this as a theoretical framework in order to guide your exploration in the field.
I see.
So, yeah.
How do you quantify something like harassment in the workforce, though?
Which is probably why both methods have to supplement each other at the end of the day to be able to, I mean, you can ask people, have you experienced sexual harassment in the workplace? And then they'll say yes or no. But to see how that will actually play out, you need qualitative tools. So quantitative is, I guess, I mean, and this just goes back to, we need both. Quantitative is more useful in order to make more generalizable findings, while qualitative actually helps you to understand what's happening on the ground and helps to put context to all those graphs and things. And so we need both. We need both. Yeah. Definitely.
I'm a strong believer in that as well. Linguistics, I suppose, is a social science maybe sometimes, but I've found that within like subfields of linguistics, people prefer to stick to only quantitative methods or only qualitative methods, and there's not so much crossover between the two. But that's a shame for the exact reason that you just said. Yeah, and especially when all the dynamics of one being more reliable than the other based in a certain context, I think that's kind of not true ever. But before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you a bit about fieldwork just a little bit more, because I have a bit of background in fieldwork. I was in Cameroon 2 summers ago.
Where in Cameroon?
I was in Kribi. Have you been?
Kribi?
Yeah.
Where's that? Sorry.
It's like on the coast. It's kind of like a...
Is it like west or east?
It's all the way on the west coast.
Okay.
So it's like a beach town. It's like beautiful. Nice. Like lots of resorts and stuff there. But it's also super linguistically diverse. So most people who I was in contact... because it's
near like the... Well, I don't know that much about linguistics, but I believe it's near like where it's considered like where all these languages are spread out from.
Yes, very
like
much so. Yeah. And so most of the people that I met there spoke minimum 4 languages. which was baffling to me as an English speaker and a bit of a French speaker. So that was very cool. But yeah, I wanted to know, you said earlier that you tend to be inspired by your surroundings. So it seems like even though you've gone off to different countries throughout the world to do your research, to do your studies,
yes.
you keep on coming back home
yes.
for the research place. So I wanted to know a little bit about what you feel like is driving you back to this place, why fieldwork for you tends to be coming home. Because for me, I kind of feel the opposite, where I feel like I understand my home, or maybe I'm just bored with it or something like that, and I keep on wanting to go outwards to understand different things. But yeah, sorry, please tell me whatever thoughts you have on the topic.
Yeah, I mean, why do I keep on going home? Because I don't understand home, I don't understand why a lot of things are the way they are.
Uh-huh.
I think it's also just basically, I can't spend so many hours writing a thesis about something I don't care about.
Totally.
So for me, it has to come from a place of something that I care about, something that I want to see change. Mm-hmm. And I think there are just so many things every day I wake up when I'm back home and I see, this has to change, we need to do this and we need to do that. So I think that very much inspires me. Yeah. Probably that, what do you call it? There needs to be social change component actually inspires me. So which is probably why I keep on going home, because I just have a vision for where we should be and where we're not. Definitely. And that's what I want to be very much a part of changing. I want to be very much part of moving to where we have, because Nigeria has so much potential. We have so many talented, innovative, creative people, and many times it doesn't reflect in the way our society is organized. Mm-hmm. And so I definitely see myself part of trying to make my home country and the whole world. Charity begins at home, right? So make it a place where make it a place where I think it should look. Make it at least look more like what I think it should look like.
Definitely.
So, yeah. So why do you always, let me become the interviewer now.
Yeah, no,
why
please.
Are you always feeling the need to go out? What motivates you?
I just am fascinated by different experiences, kind of in any context. I started learning African languages because they were just completely different from English, specifically Bantu languages. But just the part of speech, like this element of language that I consider so elemental, because in English, for example, like nouns, adjectives, verbs, like the lines are very clearly drawn. I'm learning now in my MPhil dissertation that it's not as clear in a lot of Bantu languages. Swahili is one where adjectives tend to be far less common than different kind of constructions. That's just one example. But I find myself wanting to go out because there's so much more to see in the world, and I feel like also it has to do with where you come from, So being from New York is fine. New York has it does have some trouble, but like given the exact space where I grew up, like that is not a community that necessarily is not supported right now. And so I would love to use kind of like the privilege that I've been given to help out communities that need more support. But in entering these new spaces, obviously that comes with all kinds of power dynamics. And being an undergrad in Cameroon for the first time, I was not really prepared, and feel like I look back on so many things I did and said, and I was like, oh my God, that was so stupid. Like I shouldn't have come across that way, or I shouldn't have handled this scenario in a certain way. So it's definitely a learning process. I did want to ask you about the dynamics of conducting interviews, like in a space that you know super well. When you're coming from Cambridge or Harvard or something like that, did you feel as though the dynamic changed between the interviewee and you? Were you no longer coming from the perspective of being Nigerian or being a researcher? I mean, how did these identity politics basically enter the study, if they did at all?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, having gone to all these universities, I'm a very privileged person, and growing up I had a really happy childhood, and we've always been financially comfortable, and also having to. So it definitely depended on who I was interviewing. So when I was interviewing like friends and colleagues or people or people who have completed tertiary education, there's definitely a different dynamic than if I'm going into, because I went into some really like low income, poor communities.
For sure.
And interviewing people who didn't complete primary education. And so, definitely in those different spaces, I was a different kind of person, and definitely the dynamic was different. So, yeah.
And how did you navigate that? Like, how did you prepare yourself in any way when you were talking to a group of people who had completely different childhoods from yourself? Or did you just kind of play it by ear?
I guess I'm not. Each experience of fieldwork is a learning experience, and I think I'm still in the midst of this dissertation process. I haven't really had a chance to step back and reflect.
Totally.
Definitely a general stance I try to take in my research is to try as much as possible to come down to the level of the people that you're trying to engage with. And so realize that you are the one that needs to learn. You need to learn from them. That's the most important thing. Like, that you are there to learn from them. And so you need to listen to them and allow them. Obviously you have your questions and guidance, so you can't fool yourself. You're certainly there for something, but still, like, you don't know anything about this person's life.
Right.
So listen to what it is that they have to say, and as much as possible try to. Because I remember when I did my previous field work, so that's for my undergraduate dissertation. I guess I've had more time to reflect on that one, and when I got to one of the offices where I did an observership, there was this whole idea of, this girl that has just come down from America who goes to Harvard. And there'll definitely be connotations about you and who you are. And I remember the people in the office were like, okay, let's go to this really local joint to go and eat. And they thought that, like, if we go there, I'll be acting all tushed up coming down to their level, and like there's no, like, I'm just like, even despite the fact that I've gone to school in America and all these things, it's like that doesn't really change anything about who I am and stuff like that. So so just realizing that I think something I try to keep in mind when I'm doing my research is that I'm here to learn, not to dictate. And so
100%. Yeah, I ended up, when I was in Cameroon, what began as me asking native speakers questions about the language turned into essentially they're giving me lessons on the language, which felt way more comfortable, you know? It's like, you're 100% right. I was there to learn things. I was not there to give any favors or anything. These people were giving me a favor. So yeah, it was great. We would do like section by section, just go through the language, and it was wonderful in that respect. And that was definitely the times when it felt most like a friendship, like a community kind of. In any event, thank you so much for coming and talking on the channel, Iya.
Thank you, Matt.
People really, really are going to be excited to hear what you have to say.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt, and thank you for your questions.
Of course. Good luck with your dissertation.
And
it's
you
gonna
too.
Be done in no time. Great.
Okay.